The hum of dim bar music blurred in my ears the second Kai Marlowe shook his head, and every warm, hopeful thread I'd woven for 2 years frayed apart all at once. The neon glow of Maple Creek's downtown bar streaked across his calm, unyielding face as he pulled his hand gently from mine, his tone soft enough to feel like a kindness but firm enough to cut straight through every lie I'd told myself to keep going. "Alara, you're amazing. You're too good for me, but I can't return how you feel." It was the 99th time I'd bared my heart to him, the 99th time I'd let myself be vulnerable, and the 99th crisp, final rejection I'd walked away with. I'd lost count of the late nights, the carefully curated gifts, the cancelled plans with friends, and the endless quiet hopes that maybe, just maybe, he'd finally see me the way I saw him. I forced a thin, practiced smile to mask the crack splitting my chest, my fingers tightening around the cold glass of gin and tonic in my hand. My throat burned with unspoken words and suppressed tears, and I prepared to mutter my usual hollow "it's okay" before turning to leave. But before I could utter a single sound, my phone lit up bright inside my clutch, flooding the dim bar space with harsh white light. Dozens of comment-style notifications popped up one after another, stacking rapidly across my locked screen, none from social media, none from any app one recognized. They read like raw, unfiltered audience remarks, sharp and unforgiving, meant only for my eyes. Is this woman serious? She's wealthy, gorgeous, and still chasing this man like she has nothing else going for her. Wake up. Kai is head over heels for Lila, that girl from the coffee shop who barely has 2 nickels to rub together. Every time you push him harder, you're digging your own grave. Keep this up and you'll end up bankrupt, tangled up in legal trouble, locked away somewhere with nowhere left to see or my breath caught hard in my throat. Cold dread crawled up my spine, sharp and visceral. I fumbled with the phone, swiping frantically, trying to close the flood of strange text, yet the messages kept spawning, line after line. No screenshot would capture them. No setting would make them stop. Nobody around me seemed to notice the glowing, haunting warnings plastered across my display. Kai stood right in front of me, oblivious, sympathy written all over his features, completely unaware some invisible force was screaming ruin directly into my world. Panic short-circuited my brain. I could not process the rejection, could not process the terrifying predictions burning on my screen all at once. My hands shook. Without thinking, without even meeting the stranger's gaze, I spun sideways and shoved my full cold drink straight into the hands of a man sitting at the adjacent stool. Ice clinked loud inside the glass. He looked up, caught totally off guard, dark brows lifting in quiet surprise. Jet Rayner held the cocktail now, liquid sloshing slightly over the rim onto his knuckles. He had been minding his own business, half watching a muted sports broadcast above the bar, until a distraught woman dumped her drink on him out of thin air. Kai shifted his weight, ready to step back and walk out the door. To go find Lila, the woman he actually wanted. The strange messages still pulsed on my phone. I stood frozen between them, chest heaving, realizing nothing in my carefully built life would ever feel safe again. The sharp clink of ice still echoed in Alara's ears as Kai gave one last sad, helpless glance and turned toward the bar's front exit. His shoulders relaxed the moment he stepped away from her, like a weight he had carried for years had finally lifted. Alara did not call after him. Every muscle in her body felt tight, her stare fixed on Jet Rayner, who still held her half-spilled gin and tonic. He set the glass down carefully on the wooden countertop, wiping sticky liquor off his knuckles with a crumpled bar napkin. "Everything all right over here?" His voice was low, calm, not pushing for details, just observing. He did not sound angry about the unexpected drink pressed into his hands, only curious about how unraveled she looked. Alara flinched, shoving her phone deep back inside her leather clutch. Those brutal comment-like warnings were still flickering behind the fabric, unseen to anyone else. She could not show them. Screenshots came back blank. She had already tried that in her frantic moments just seconds before. There was no proof any of it had ever existed. If she told this stranger what she had seen, he would write her off as drunk or having a full-on breakdown. "It's nothing. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that." Her words came out shaky, her gaze darting toward the doorway where Kai had vanished. A stupid, familiar ache stirred in her chest. Even after 99 rejections, even after those terrifying predictions flashing across her screen, part of her still wanted to chase after him. She wanted to explain herself, to beg for just one more chance. Jet nodded, not pressing further. He grabbed his own beer from the counter and stood from the stool. "No harm done. Try to take it easy tonight." He walked off toward the restrooms. Leaving Alara alone at the sticky bar counter with her swirling thoughts, she ordered a glass of plain water, fingers trembling around her smartphone underneath the table. Hesitantly she pulled it out again. The pop-up remarks were gone for the moment, the home screen normal and quiet. For a fragile second she convinced herself it had all been a stress-induced hallucination, some twisted trick of exhaustion and heartbreak. Maybe her overworked mind had manufactured those harsh warnings after one too many letdowns. She opened her text thread with Kai. Their conversation history stretched on for months. Long thoughtful messages she had sent, short polite replies he had given back. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. One more text would not hurt, she told herself. Just a short message to say she was okay, to keep that thin thread of connection alive between them. Before she could stop herself, she typed out a gentle message and hit send. The second the message left her outbox, her screen exploded again. The mysterious comments flooded back, brighter and more specific this time. There it goes. You cannot stop yourself, can you? Every small reach chips away at your judgment. You already dipped into business funds to buy him that expensive camping gear last month. Keep spending to win his affection and your design studio's cash reserve will evaporate within weeks. Bad contracts will follow. Then the legal headaches. Alara's stomach dropped. No one besides herself knew she had moved studio money for that camping set. She had buried that secret deep, too ashamed to tell her best friend Marnie. How could these unseen messages know that detail? Cold panic washed over her once more. She locked the phone and stuffed it away, drinking her water in quick, sharp sips. She left the bar shortly after, driving back to her downtown condo. The quiet high-rise apartment that she had worked hard to afford normally felt like her safe harbor. Tonight every corner felt menacing. She tossed her clutch onto the kitchen counter and paced across the hardwood floors, replaying the night over and over in her mind. Could she really bring ruin down on herself just from wanting a man who would never love her back? Later that night, lying awake in her dark bedroom, her phone buzzed once. It was a bank transaction alert. The custom-made watch she had secretly ordered for Kai's upcoming birthday had just finalized its $7,000 charge against her business credit card, almost instantly. Her screen lit up once more with those cruel, knowing lines. The first real step down your destructive path is complete. Alara stared at the glowing text in the dark, her heart hammering in her chest. The abstract warning from the bar was no longer hypothetical. She had just made the very mistake the messages had cautioned her against. There was no taking the charge back. The damage was already starting. Morning light seeped through Alara's bedroom curtains, but she had barely slept. The $7,000 charge burned in her mind, paired with those untraceable pop-ups that knew secrets no outsider should ever uncover. She sat on the edge of her bed, scrolling through her business credit card statement, the number sitting heavy on the display. Common sense screamed at her to cancel the custom watch order right away. Yet some stubborn, foolish part of her hesitated. What if this gift finally changed how Kai saw her? She dragged herself to her design studio mid-morning. Her small office occupied one bright corner of a shared workspace in Maple Creek. Client files stacked neatly across her desk, project deadlines waiting for her focus. Normally this place grounded her. Today every task felt distant. Her phone sat face down beside her keyboard, and she kept flinching, half expecting it to flare up with those vicious warnings at any second. Marnie showed up around noon, dropping a paper coffee cup onto Alara's desk. Her best friend's expression was already sharp, having picked up on Alara's hollow tone over last night's quick text. You look wrecked. What happened after the bar? Marnie pulled out a spare chair and sat down. Did Kai finally give you something other than another gentle rejection? Alara's throat tightened. She could not bring herself to talk about the phantom pop-ups. Even to Marnie, the story sounded delusional. Instead she dodged the supernatural piece and confessed the spending. I ordered him an expensive watch. On the business card, Marnie's eyes widened. Her voice dropped, sharp with frustration. Are you kidding me? That studio money is for client supplies, insurance payments, your rent. Not gifts for a man who has turned you down 99 times, Alara. This is exactly what I've been begging you to stop doing. Tension flared fast. Alara's defenses shot up. It's just one gift. It might mean something to him. It will mean nothing. He wants Lila. You keep burning your resources chasing a fantasy. Marnie shook her head. I'm tired of watching you wreck your own life over this. I can't keep picking up the pieces every time you crash. The words stung deep. Alara fell quiet, hot frustration mixing with shame. Their friendship had never fractured like this before. Marnie did not storm out, but her warmth was gone. She left shortly afterward, leaving Alara alone with her guilt. By late afternoon, Alara could not shake the memory of Jet Rayner, the stranger at the bar who had witnessed her full-blown panic. He had seemed calm, observant, the sort of person who noticed small details. Against her better judgment, she dug through her purse. She had grabbed a crumpled bar receipt the night before, and scribbled on its edge was a partial number she'd glimpsed on his drink tab. It was a long shot, but it was the only lead she had. She typed out a short, careful text, admitting she was the woman who'd shoved a drink into his hands, asking if he would meet for coffee. To her surprise, he replied within 20 minutes. He could meet her the next day at a downtown cafe. That small glimmer of hope steadied her. She resolved to pull herself back. She would hold space between herself and Kai. No more random texts, no more impulsive purchases. She would figure out what those pop-ups were, and patch up the damage she had done. For several hours, the plan felt solid. Then her phone buzzed. It was Kai. Not a long message, just a short, polite check-in. Hope you got home safe last night. I've been thinking about you. Those 12 simple words hit her like gasoline to a smoldering fire. All her hard-won resolve started melting away instantly. Her thumb hovered over the reply box. The memory of the $7,000 charge, Marnie's angry warning, the terrible predictions on her screen all faded to background noise. For one reckless moment, she convinced herself this was the shift she had waited 2 years to see. Her phone flickered. The pop UPS returned, dim and insistent, sitting half-visible behind Kai's text thread. Beware. One kind message is not love. This is how you slip right back into ruin. Alara stared at the screen, torn in 2 directions, her whole carefully built plan hanging by a thread. Alara sat frozen at her office desk, Kai's text glowing bright on her phone. The warning pop-up lingered faint at the edge of her display, easy enough to ignore if she wanted to. Every logical part of her knew better. Marnie's bitter words echoed inside her head, along with the weight of that $7,000 business card charge. But loneliness and 2 years of unrequited longing drowned out all reasonable thought. She typed back quickly. I made it home okay. Thanks for checking in. It meant a lot. Hitting send felt like crossing an invisible line. The moment the message went through, the flood of pop UPS exploded across her screen again, sharp and accusatory. There you go. You grab onto every tiny scrap of kindness. He is not changing. You are handing him more power over your choices. You will keep sacrificing your work, your savings, your peace for nothing. Alara flipped her phone face down, refusing to read another line. She told herself she was just being polite, that one harmless reply would not spiral into disaster. Still, guilt gnawed at her through the rest of her workday. She could barely focus on client revisions, her mind drifting back to what Kai might write next. By evening, Kai never texted back. That quiet silence stung worse than another outright rejection. Restless and frustrated, Alara drove across town to the coffee shop where Lila worked. She told herself she only wanted to see the woman Kai cared about, just to understand what she had that Alara did not. It was a foolish, impulsive urge, and she knew it the second she pulled into the store's parking lot. Through the big front window, she watched Lila laugh while handing a customer their latte. Simple, easy warmth radiated off her. When Kai walked through the shop door minutes later, Alara's chest tightened. He leaned over the counter, and Lila kissed him soft and casual. The sight landed like a blow. All the quiet hope Alara had clung to crumpled. Rage bubbled up, hot and unthinking. She stormed to her car before either of them spotted her. On the drive home, she fired off a frustrated message to Marnie, ranting about Lila, about how unfair everything felt. Marnie's reply was short and cold. I warned you this would happen. I don't want to keep listening to this cycle. I need some space from you right now. Reading that text, Alara felt completely alone. Her best friend was pulling away, Kai belonged to another woman, and those mysterious pop UPS hovered over every part of her life. No one believed what she was seeing. No one could even see the warnings themselves. The next afternoon, Alara showed up to the downtown cafe to meet Jet. He was already seated at a back table, notebook laid out beside his cold coffee. She slid into the chair across from him, shoulders tight, and tried to explain everything. The 99 rejections, the comments that only she could view, the way they knew about her hidden studio fund spending. Jet listened without interrupting, his expression neutral. When she finished, he leaned forward slightly. All I know is what you're telling me. I saw how unraveled you were that night in the bar, but I have not seen these messages. There is no physical proof. He could not confirm whether it was hallucination, some strange hack, or something else entirely. He did point out one brutal truth, though. Whether those pop UPS are real or not, your financial risk is very real. You've already dipped into operating funds for personal gifts. That alone can sink a small design business. Alara left the meeting with no clear answers. She had hoped Jet would hand her a solution, but he only laid bare how precarious her situation had grown. She went back to her condo and pulled up her studio bank portal. Scrolling through recent transactions, she froze. A client payment she had been counting on had fallen through completely. The customer backed out of a large renovation project without warning. The loss of that income hit hard. Combined with the expensive watch charge, her cash reserve dropped far lower than she ever expected. Almost immediately, her phone lit up. The pop UPS appeared once more, blunt and unsparing. There is the first crack. This is exactly the collapse we told you about. One lost client, one reckless purchase, and the downward slide gathers speed. Alara stared at the bank numbers on her laptop, then at the ominous text on her phone. Her earlier judgment had been fatally flawed. She thought replying to Kai would be harmless. Now tangible financial trouble was settling in around her. Isolation closed and heavy. She had pushed Marnie away, got no answers from Jet, and Kai was fully wrapped up in Lila. There was nowhere for her to turn. Alara sat in her home office long after midnight, laptop open to her studio's bank dashboard. Red-tinged numbers glared back at her, impossible to ignore. The lost client contract plus the $7,000 watch charge had eaten deep into her operating buffer. She kept refreshing the page, half hoping the figures would somehow fix themselves. They never did. Her phone rested face up beside the keyboard. The pop UPS stayed quiet for hours, as if waiting for her to sink deeper into anxiety before they struck again. She kept going back over every strange line those messages had shown her. They never predicted random misfortune. Every warning lined up perfectly with choices she had already made in secret. No outsider should know she'd siphoned studio money, no stranger could guess how badly she longed for Kai. A thought hit her cold, out of nowhere. What if these were not external messages at all? What if this was something inside her, parts of herself she refused to listen to, forced up onto her screen? Her own buried fears, dressed up like outside commentary. She grabbed her car keys early the next morning and drove back to meet Jet at his small downtown office. The space was plain, stacked with folders and legal reference books. He let her in, and she laid out her new theory. Jet leaned back in his chair, processing what she said. That would explain why no one else can see them. Why they know every private thought and hidden financial move you make. Your subconscious screaming alarms you keep brushing off. They are not foretelling fate. They are calculating consequences. He pulled up her spreadsheets, walking line by line through her business finances. The picture grew uglier by the minute. It was not only the watch. Over the past 2 years, Alara had scattered smaller, quiet expenses for Kai across her business accounts. Concert tickets, weekend trip deposits, high-end outdoor gear. She had categorized them as miscellaneous office costs to hide the truth from herself. Cumulatively, the damage stretched far past that single $7,000 order. You've been shuffling personal romantic spending into business books for years, Jet said quietly. If an auditor looked at these records, you could face serious civil penalties. Not jail out of nowhere, but lawsuits, repayment demands, massive fines. The pop UPS were not lying about risk, only about where it originates. Alara's stomach twisted. The terrible future she feared was not some curse forced upon her. She had been building it, one impulsive decision at a time. Shock blurred into sharp, heavy shame. All this time she had blamed fate or unfair circumstances. When the danger came from her own desperate pursuit of Kai, while they went over old invoices, one document caught Jet's eye. A service agreement Alara had signed 6 months before. Back then, she'd wanted to arrange a fancy private getaway hoping to win Kai over. She'd entered her studio as the paying party without reading the fine print. The vendor held her business liable for the full contract sum even if she cancelled the trip. She had completely forgotten the document existed. Jet tapped the screen. This is the ticking bomb. Cancel now, and they can come after your business assets. It's a binding signature. Alara's hands began to shake. She had buried that contract so deep she had erased it from her memory entirely. The pop UPS had hinted at legal trouble, and here it sat, real and tangible. This was not a hypothetical warning anymore. Liability was locked into paper with her own signature. On her phone, the faint comment-style text surfaced once again, softer this time, almost mournful. You did this. The disaster was never coming for you from somewhere far away. You built it piece by piece. Alara stared at the digital copy of the contract on Jet's monitor. Mid-story crisis landed hard. She was staring down enforceable debt, messy business records, and the bitter realization she had nearly destroyed her career chasing a love that would never be hers. There was no magical way to undo all the choices she had already made. The drive back to her condo felt suffocating, every breath shallow and tight in Alara's chest. For the first time since the 99 rejections, she could no longer blame bad timing, cruel fate, or even Kai's indifference for her suffering. The ruin looming over her life was self-made. Every reckless swipe of her business card, every unread contract clause, every desperate text she'd sent had stacked up into a storm she could no longer outrun. The pop-ups were not a curse, they were the truth she'd spent 2 years refusing to hear. By evening, the quiet calm of her upscale apartment felt like a cruel joke. Sleek modern furniture, polished hardwood floors, a curated design space she'd built from the ground up, all of it now teetered on the edge of collapse because she'd let obsession override every ounce of her good sense. She'd planned to spend the night drafting damage control plans for her studio finances. But her phone lit up before she could open a single spreadsheet. It was a public social media post from Lila, shared to her local community page. A soft, candid photo of Kai leaning against Lila's coffee shop counter, smiling down at her while she held up a new drink recipe. The caption was simple, warm, and final. So grateful for the love that chooses me, steady and true. Dozens of local friends commented sweet wishes. No drama, no hidden shade, just pure, uncomplicated happiness for the couple Alara had spent 2 years competing against. The post was not aimed at her. Lila had never once harassed her, never plotted against her, never taken advantage of her feelings. That made it worse. Kai's love for Lila was genuine, gentle, and unshakable, proof that Alara's endless pursuit had never stood a chance. Her phone screen flickered, and the familiar subconscious warnings surfaced again. No longer angry or accusatory, just hollow and factual. This is what you refuse to see. He does not want you. He never will. Alara collapsed onto her couch, staring blankly at the wall. All the stubborn hope she'd clung to for 2 years shattered completely. There was no last-minute miracle, no hidden chance, no gift grand enough to change Kai's heart. Her endless sacrifices had been for absolutely nothing. She texted Marnie that night, swallowing her pride, typing a raw, honest apology for her stubbornness, her obsession, and the way she'd pushed her best friend away. Minutes later, Marnie's reply popped up, tired and firm but not unkind. "I'm sorry you're hurting, but I can't fix this for you. You have to save yourself. I need more time." The last steady pillar of her support system pulled away entirely. Alara was alone, no friend to comfort her, no love to chase, no way to ignore the financial and legal mess she'd created. She forced herself to open the vendor contract email Jet had forwarded her earlier that day. Buried in the fine print was a strict 30-day demand clause, full payment owed in 3 weeks, or formal legal proceedings and credit damage would begin. The numbers stared back at her, cold and unforgiving, $10,000 in outstanding contractual fees, on top of her already depleted studio reserves. Panic curdled into quiet, unbreakable resolve. The old Alara was dead, the girl who chased unavailable love, who buried her mistakes, who traded her stability for empty hope. The new version of her had no more room for weakness. She was done begging for someone else's affection. Her only priority now was survival. She locked her phone, muted all notifications, and sat up straight on her couch. No more distractions. No more self-pity. She would fix her books, settle her liabilities, rebuild her business, and reclaim the life she'd nearly destroyed. But just as she breathed in her first steady breath of determination, a new email pinged in her inbox. Subject line bold and alarming, official contract reminder, imminent payment default notice. The countdown to her public, professional collapse had officially begun. Alara stared at the default notice on her laptop screen until her eyes burned, the words blurring together but never losing their sharp, brutal meaning. $10,000, 30 days, or face formal default, credit reporting, and legal action against her small design studio. For the first time in 2 years, Kai's name did not cross her mind. There was no room left for longing, no space for what-ifs. Survival drowned every useless emotion. She woke up early the next morning, crisp and unshaken, far earlier than she had for any previous crush-driven gesture. She brewed black coffee, pulled up every business account, and began itemizing every mistake she'd hidden. The luxury watch, the weekend getaway contract, the random gifts and trips she'd disguised as business expenses. She listed them one by one, logging dates, amounts, and vendors. Shame lingered, but it no longer paralyzed her. She texted Jet first thing, asking for a full consultation to negotiate the contract terms. He replied quickly, telling her to come to his office mid-morning and bring every signed document she had. No vague advice, no gentle warnings, only structured, actionable fixes. When she arrived, Jet watched her step into the room with a quiet, noticeable shift. The panicked, unraveled woman from the bar was gone. In her place was someone focused, grounded, and ready to clean up her own mess. "You're different today," he said. Flipping open her contract file, "I finally stopped lying to myself," Alara answered flatly. They spent hours going over negotiation strategy. Jet explained that the vendor would rather settle for a modified payment plan than drag a small business through costly court proceedings. Her best path was transparency, full accountability, and a structured repayment offer. There was no loophole, no miracle escape, only slow, uncomfortable repair. Midway through their meeting, Alara's phone lit up. Kai's name flashed across the screen. Her chest tightened on instinct, but the old craving was faint, distant, almost foreign. He'd heard she'd been absent from local social circles and wanted to check in again. She read the message once, then locked her screen and set it aside. For 2 years, a text from Kai would have overridden every priority, every worry, every promise to herself. Now it was merely a distraction she could not afford. Jet noticed the movement. "You're not replying? What's the point?" Alara said simply. "He's being kind because he feels bad. Kindness isn't what I need right now. I need to fix my life." Jet nodded, a quiet respect settling into his expression. By the end of the workday, Alara drafted a formal settlement offer to the vendor, outlining a structured monthly payment plan with a partial lump sum from her personal savings. It would drain her emergency buffer, force her to cut all non-essential spending, and delay studio upgrades for years, but it would stop the default process and protect her business license and credit score. She sent the offer and exhaled for the first time in days. The worst was no longer accelerating out of control. She was finally steering the downward spiral instead of falling through it. That night, her phone lit up one last time with the familiar comment pop UPS. The tone was no longer angry or warning. It was calm, almost relieved. "You finally stopped running from yourself." The ruin was never fate. It was choice. And choice can be rewritten. For the first time ever, Alara did not fear the words. She understood them. She opened her text thread with Kai one final time, not to reconcile, not to beg, but to close the chapter cleanly. She typed a short, steady message. "Thank you for checking in. I'm doing okay, but I'm focusing on my life right now. I won't be reaching out again." I wish you and Lila all the best. She hit send, muted the conversation, and placed her phone face down on her nightstand. The obsession that had ruled her days, drained her finances, and nearly destroyed her career was finally, voluntarily over. But minutes later, just as she prepared to sleep, a new reply arrived from the vendor's legal team. Their response was short, unyielding, and unexpectedly devastating. They refused the payment plan. They wanted full balance due within 7 days. No exceptions. The vendor's brutal reply burned itself into Alara's vision the second she opened it. 7 days to pay $10,000 in full, or they would file default proceedings with the State Business Bureau and tank her studio's credit before the end of the week. Her structured, careful plan to crawl out of ruin had been instantly crushed. All the steady resolve she'd built wavered, sharp and desperate panic flaring back to life. She texted Jet immediately, forwarding the legal response without extra explanation. He called her within 2 minutes, his tone sharp and business-focused. They're not negotiating because they smell urgency, Jet explained. They know you're a small operation, that default would cripple you fast. They're pushing for full leverage. Alara paced her living room, mind racing. She'd already drained most of her loose personal reserves covering the watch charge and studio overhead. Scrounging up 10 grand in 7 days was mathematically tight, but not impossible. If she stripped every non-essential asset she owned. That afternoon, she made a cold, calculated list of everything she could liquidate: her designer wardrobe, unused high-end camera equipment, the luxury fitness memberships she'd barely used, and the vintage outdoor gear she'd bought originally to impress Kai. Every item tied to her old, obsessive lifestyle went straight to a local resale platform. She priced everything low for fast sale, prioritizing speed over profit. The process humbled her fast. For 2 years, she'd spent money carelessly to feel worthy of someone else's attention. Now she was selling those empty luxuries just to save the life she'd actually built for herself. By evening, buyers flooded her messages. Items moved fast, cash deposits hitting her account one after another. The progress was slow but tangible, and for the first time since the crisis began, she saw a clear path forward. Midway through her asset sale, Marnie sent a tentative, unprompted text. Heard you've been cleaning up your mess. I'm not ready to go back to how things were, but I hope you fix this. It was not a full reconciliation, but it was an olive branch, the first crack of warmth in the cold isolation she'd endured for weeks. Alara typed a quiet, sincere thank you, no excuses, no oversharing, just gratitude. The distance between them remained, but the friendship was no longer completely broken. Meanwhile, Kai noticed Alara's sudden silence. No more sporadic texts, no more lingering glances, no more subtle attempts to cross paths. For the first time in 2 years, she was completely absent from his orbit. That unfamiliar void unsettled him. He messaged her again, longer and more confused this time, asking if she was upset, if he'd done something wrong. Alara saw the message, felt zero temptation to reply. The old ache was gone, replaced by quiet clarity. Kai's confusion was not care, it was just adjustment to no longer being adored. Jet called her late that night with new, critical information he dug up after digging into the vendor's business history. This company regularly bullies small business owners. They reject payment plans to force quick defaults, then buy out the debt at a discount and resell it for profit. It's their playbook. The final hidden card was exposed. This was not a fair contractual dispute, it was corporate exploitation targeting her vulnerability. Alara sat back in her chair, exhausted but suddenly sharp with purpose. She was no longer just scrambling to survive. She was ready to fight back against the system that wanted to crush her for her past mistakes. She tallied her resale earnings, cross-referenced her remaining savings, and calculated her final gap. She was close, painfully close, but still a few $1,000s short of the full amount. Time was burning through her 7-day window, and the vendor's legal team was already drafting official filing paperwork. The balance of power had fully reversed. Alara was no longer the reckless, lovesick girl falling apart at the seams. She was disciplined, strategic, and ready to defend everything she had left. But the final stretch would demand every last bit of her strength, and one last sacrifice she had not yet anticipated. The morning of day 5 arrived, and Alara's bank tally still sat stubbornly short. $2,000 separated her from full payment and salvation. $2,000 to keep her studio, her credit, and her entire professional future from collapsing. She'd sold everything she could bear to part with. Her designer bags, photography gear, premium subscriptions, all gone. There was nothing left to liquidate, no more luxuries from her old obsessive life to cash out. For a single, weak moment, panic crept back in. She'd fought so hard, changed so much, fixed every terrible habit and foolish choice. Was she still going to lose everything anyway? Jet met her at her studio first thing, bringing printed records of the vendor's predatory business patterns. He'd gathered public court files, past small business complaints, and old default cases. The pattern was undeniable. They targeted solo entrepreneurs, rejected all reasonable settlements, and weaponized fine print to squeeze fast settlements or destroy credit for profit. You don't have to beat them with money alone, Jet said, spreading the documents across her desk. You beat them with leverage. They don't want this pattern exposed in open court. Bad publicity kills their whole scam. Alara's eyes lifted, exhaustion clearing into sharp focus. This was her final stand. She drafted a new message to the vendor's legal team, calm, precise, and unyielding. She included bullet points of their documented history of predatory practices. Stated she was fully prepared to file a countercomplaint with the State Business Regulatory Board, and told them she would go public with their pattern of exploiting small business owners if they pushed the default through. Then she placed her final offer, full payment in 48 hours. No penalties, no extra fees, or mutual standstill and formal dispute mediation. It was a calculated bluff built entirely on truth. She had the evidence. She had the grounds. And for the first time in this fight, she held the upper hand. The vendor's office went radio silent for hours. Waiting stretched every nerve thin. To steady herself, Alara opened her text thread with Kai. His recent messages sat unread. Confused and gentle, wondering why she'd vanished. Why she no longer chased him, she typed one last message. Clean and final, no bitterness, no regret. No hidden longing. I'm not upset. I'm just no longer available. Wishing you nothing but happiness. This time, there was no residual ache, no quiet what if. She closed the thread, archived it, and let him go completely. 2 years of fixation, 99 rejections, endless sacrifice, finished. Kai was not the loss. The loss was the version of herself she'd abandoned chasing him. Today, she finally got her life back. An hour later, the vendor replied. They accepted her terms. Full payment extension to the end of the 7-day window, 0 additional fees, no default filing. They backed down instantly, unwilling to let their predatory business model face official scrutiny. The breakthrough landed like quiet thunder. Alara had not bullied her way out. She had outsmarted them. By that evening, she closed the remaining funding gap with a small, temporary withdrawal from her long-term personal savings, one last controlled, intentional sacrifice, no impulse, no obsession. She transferred the full $10,000 balance to the vendor's account, watched the confirmation screen pop up, and exhaled a breath she'd been holding for months. The legal and financial crisis was officially over, but the victory carried weight. She sat alone in her quiet studio, staring at her clean transaction receipt, fully understanding every cost she'd paid, lost time, fractured friendship, wasted money, misplaced years, and endless self-disrespect. The battle was won, but the scars remained. She was free, but she was no longer the naive, hopeful girl who'd once believed love could fix everything. Her phone flickered one last time with the familiar subconscious pop-up words. Final and unflinching, you saved yourself. No one else did, and just like that, the warnings vanished completely. No flicker, no return, no further commentary. The voice that had haunted her, guided her, and terrified her for weeks was gone for good. The chapter of ruin and obsession was closed. But the quiet work of rebuilding had only just begun. The morning after the final payment went through felt unnervingly quiet. No pop-ups haunted Alara's screen, no legal threats loomed over her inbox, no restless urge pushed her to check Kai's social media or overanalyze every polite word he'd ever spoken. The storm that had consumed her life for months was finally gone, leaving behind stillness she had not known in 2 years. She woke up slow, without panic, without dread. Her studio's credit status was clear, the contract dispute fully resolved, and her books finally scrubbed clean of the reckless romantic expenses she'd hidden for so long. The victory did not feel explosive or triumphant. It felt calm, steady, hard-earned peace. She spent the morning reorganizing her office space. She filed corrected expense reports, updated her business budgets, and set firm new boundaries for her personal and professional finances. Every spreadsheet, every folder, every new rule was a reminder. She was no longer willing to destroy herself to prove she was worthy of someone else's love. Midday, Marnie texted her out of the blue. Coffee, if you're ready to talk properly. No drama, no chaos. Just us. Alara smiled for the first time in weeks. She replied yes immediately. They met at their usual downtown cafe, the same strip where Lila's shop sat only a few blocks away. Marnie showed up quiet but soft around the edges, no longer sharp with frustration. They sat by the window, and Alara told her everything, not just the financial mess, but the haunting pop-ups, the self-destructive cycle, the brutal truth of how deeply she'd abandoned herself. Marnie listened without interruption. When Alara finished, Marnie reached across the table. I'm so proud of you for cleaning it up, she said. I hated watching you drown. I needed space so I wouldn't have to watch you hurt yourself anymore. But I've missed my best friend. Their friendship did not snap instantly back to the careless closeness it once was. There was new wisdom between them, a quiet understanding that people can break, can fail, can mess up irreparably, and still rebuild. The rift healed slowly, gently, honestly. Later that afternoon, Alara passed by the bar where it all began. The neon sign still glowed dimly through the window, the same stool where she'd confessed her heart for the 99th rejection still empty. She parked her car and stood on the sidewalk for a minute, letting the memory wash over her. The panic, the shame, the terrifying flood of unseen warnings, all of it felt distant now. Like a story belonging to a different girl, Jet texted her that evening, checking in on how she was holding up now that everything had settled. He did not push for meetings, did not ask for favors, did not insert himself into her new peace. He simply wanted to know she was alright, Alara replied truthfully. I'm finally alright. She never deleted Kai's number, never blocked him, never needed petty closure. When she saw him later that week walking hand in hand with Lila down Main Street, she felt nothing but genuine indifference. He was not her loss. He was just the final marker of an old life she was grateful to leave behind. That night, Alara sat on her condo balcony overlooking the Maple Creek skyline. Her business was smaller now, her savings thinner, her past scarred with mistakes. But her future was entirely hers. She no longer loved desperately, no longer chased someone who could not choose her, no longer burned her own resources to earn affection. The pop UPS never returned. The subconscious alarms had quieted for good, no longer needing to scream because she was finally listening to herself. She had learned the cruelest, kindest truth of her entire life: ruin was never something that happened to her. It was something she chose. And so was survival. She closed her eyes, breathed in the cool evening air, and let the old chapter vanish completely. She was no longer the girl who begged to be loved. She was the woman who saved herself.